so once again, we're back again. You know what I'm saying? Iron sharpeneth iron this week. You know what I mean? I hope all y'all people out there, you got your thinking caps, you got your notes, you got your pen and paper. Because we're going to go into a whole lot of things and really get to breaking down, you know, a subject about the Israelites, right? You know what I'm saying? Stolen identity,
Don't
right?
Get hot. Give me back bottom bite.
Yeah. Right? So we're going to go through the genealogies, you know what I mean, for everybody, and then we're going to go break it down and, you know what I'm saying, see if we can track down, you know what I'm saying, you know, what's been hidden from, you know what I'm saying, the world about the true identity of the Israelites.
Call it what it is. Liars, deceivers. Yeah. I like it. Yeah. I like that Barack, though. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is part one. We're going to end up doing a part two. But today we're going to focus on the Northern Kingdom. So let's get into it, break everything down so that people will understand. Our first scripture we're going to go to is Genesis chapter 9, verses 18 through 19.
Genesis 9, verses 18 and 19. And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the three sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread.
All right. Okay, so in our first, what we just now seen is that by the whole earth was the three sons of Noah was the whole earth spread. And as we can see, you know, we got, all right, so we got Shem, okay, you see that? All right, and this is in Arabia, as you can see, it's in Arabia. All right, Ham over here, right, and that's Africa, right? Okay. And we see, all right, and now let's go and we see Japheth is up in Europe, okay?
Small heads.
Right, okay, so Japheth, all right? All right, so we see where the three sons of Noah, you know what I mean, and where their descendants spread. And we see where the land, you know what I mean, that they spread to. Japheth, after the flood, went to the north. Shem went to the south and to the east, and Ham went to the west. Okay, so these is what we're saying. So basically, what we established is that, you know, we're all related. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. You know, so a lot of people, you know, are making this big old thing about, you know what I'm saying, you know, Esau and all this kind of jive or whatever. But at the end of the day, you got to understand, and we're going to point that out, who Esau was. All right, so let's continue on with our chronology, you know what I mean? So let's go to First Chronicles, you know what I mean, and continue on with our lineage.
All right, First Chronicles, I'm going to pick it up in chapter 1, verses 24 through 28. Shem, Arphaxad, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serug, Nahor, Terah, Abram, the same as Abraham, the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael.
Okay, so we see the lineage, you know what I mean, that Abraham comes out of the line of Shem, okay, verse 24, right? And so then Abraham has two sons, which is Isaac and Ishmael.
All right, First Chronicles 1, I'm going to pick it up in verse 34. And Abraham begat Isaac, the sons of Isaac, Esau, and Israel.
Okay. All right, and we see now the sons of Isaac is Esau and Israel. So now we're going to go in and we're going to talk something about Esau. You know, so let's go to Genesis chapter 25.
Genesis 25, verses 21 through 26. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him. And Rebekah his wife conceived, and the children struggled together within her. And she said, If it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, all over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them.
Okay, so now we see that Jacob which is Israel, and Esau are twin brothers, right?
Yep.
Esau happens to be red, okay?
Yep.
So now let's go one more thing we want to put, and then we're going to come back to Esau. Let's go to Genesis chapter 14, verse 13.
All right. Genesis 14, verse 13. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner. And these were confederate with Abraham.
Okay, so we see that Abram was a Hebrew, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Ruddy, Admonai. Ruddy is the form taken by the adjective red when used as a term of praise of the human skin. And this is its use in the Bible. The Hebrew and Greek words are all usual words of red or to be red. The dark-skinned Hebrews found great beauty in a clear complexion.
All right.
The light-skinned brother.
Okay. All right. So basically, what we just now established, right, is that the Hebrews were dark skinned, right? And that was out of a Bible encyclopedia. And if you go to the Zondervan, you'll see the exact same thing, right?
Oh, yeah, the progenitors.
Right. But now, the reason why we're even bringing this up and stopping to bring this up before we continue on is that you got a lot of people saying that Esau, you know what I'm saying, is the white man, right? Let's just be straight up, you know? Well, we see Esau is the twin brother of Jacob, which is Israel, and Esau is a Hebrew.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
You see, Abraham is Hebrew. Isaac is a Hebrew.
Say it again. I
Jacob,
think one of my headphones went out. What did you just say?
Yeah, Esau is a Hebrew.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said.
That's what we just read.
Yeah.
Ishmael is a Hebrew. Right.
Yeah.
You see. So the bottom line is when we start looking and saying, okay, you know, we see that Japheth is the Gentiles, and we'll get into that, you know, it really more specifically in the next video. But when we see that Esau happens to be, you know what I mean, that he was described as red or ruddy, okay? So when we go into the word, we want to show everybody what the ruddy is. But one of the things is, and Leroy, this is your favorite team because you're from DC and all that kind of deal. So let's show the people your logo before they said it was racist and what the red skin actually looked like, okay? Okay, so now we see, right, based off of the former Washington red skin, if you notice, you see what I'm saying? When we look at the skin that they had originally, you know what I mean, in the logo, you see what red skin actually looked like, right? You see? His face, you know what I mean, is red skinned, right? Okay? All right.
Proof is in the pudding.
Get a little tighter with your circles, man. You look just kind of sloppy.
Come on, bro.
You know?
Come on, bro.
Everything should be in order and done decently.
Come on, bro. Come on, man. This is my first time. This is my first time, bro. I mean, I'm trying to, work with me here, dog.
Gotta sloppy. Tighten it up, bro. Tighten it up. Stay within the lines. You like little kid outside the lines with Crayola.
Yeah.
Stay in the lines, bro. Stay in the lines.
They need some dotted lines.
Yeah.
Trace.
Yeah. But now, now the key point that we're going to end up coming back to that red skin logo, because when we start talking about the Israelites, we see, you know what I'm saying, that their complexion had to range from dark skin to red skin, right? And this is going to come back in some of the things that we're getting ready to show as we proceed in this video. But now let's go back to the chronology, you know what I'm saying, and pick it back up from where we left off before we jumped into this whole Esau thing. But now let's go to 1 Chronicles chapter 2.
1 Chronicles chapter 2, I'm going to pick it up in verses 1 and 2. Verse 1. These are the sons of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar and Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, and Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Okay,
so we see the sons of Israel, which are the 12 sons of Israel, or the 12 tribes of Israel, okay? And this is when we start talking about the children of Israel, All right.
Jacob's
And the
boys.
key,
Jacob's boys.
right. and just in chapter 2, verse 1, you see the prominent names of Levi, which we talked about as far as the priest.
Yep.
Judah, as we talked about the kings where the kings come from.
Mm-hmm.
And in verse 2, you see Joseph, who we're going to jump over here and talk about Joseph just in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see Benjamin also, who was always with
Baby
Judah.
boy.
Okay, there you go.
Mhm.
All right.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So now let's go talk about Joseph a little bit. Let's go to Genesis chapter 39.
Genesis chapter 39. I'm going to pick it up in verse 1 through 17. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. And it came to pass from that time that he had made with the overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly man and well favored. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in this house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came unto me to lie with me, and cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled, and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out.
Okay. All right. So now we see the one thing that it tells us about Joseph, verse 17. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant, right? So we see Abraham as a Hebrew. We see Joseph as a Hebrew. We also see from the Bible dictionary that the Hebrews were dark skinned, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So now let's go look up these tombs and see what we got here.
No.
All right.
The tomb of Ramses III is located at the base of the Valley of the Kings. This tomb was originally started by Seknarcht, but
what do we have here? You know,
them look like some ruddy people.
Hey, don't you see some ruddy?
Let me see some dark
and some chocolate folks.
See some red, see some light skin.
I see some red bone. Ain't that red bone bag right there?
Yeah, right there, yeah.
What's your name, sister?
was abandoned when it broke into another tomb, that of Amenmesse. Ramses III, the son of Seknakht, decided to reuse the tomb by offsetting the axis, and the dead-end room that had hit the other tomb was simply ignored.
What do we have here?
This tomb was... The first corridor contains 10 annexes, added in by Ramses III. This was very unusual for a tomb in this era. They were decorated with unique scenes of the king's treasury and royal armoury.
All over the place.
Yeah. It was like dark-skinned folk.
Yeah.
Ramses III was the last great pharaoh, reigning for 31 years. He defended his country against foreign invasion in 3 great wars, but ultimately they sapped the resources of his treasury. And in later years, the lack of resources and corruption caused the first strike in history, when workers on the royal tombs had their monthly rations delayed.
Don't none of them look like you.
A breeding ground for unrest was in place, when poor harvests were made for a period of almost 20 years.
What are you doing there, donkey? What are you doing on that wall, donkey?
Possibly due to a volcanic eruption, reducing the amount of sunlight reaching the ground. A plot by the royal harem, instigated by one of his wives, T, resulted in his murder when his throat was slit as far as the bone.
You good, Leroy?
Uh-huh.
All right. Genesis 50, verses 7 through 14. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the house of Joseph and his brethren, and his father's house, only their little ones, and their flocks and their herds, they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan, and where they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians." Wherefore the name of it was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. And his sons did unto him according as he commanded them. For his sons carried him into the land of Canaan, and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field for possession of a burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. And Joseph returned into Egypt, he and his brethren, and all that went up with him to bury his father, after he had buried his father.
Okay, so we see that Joseph when he went back to bury Israel, right, in the land of Canaan, the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, in verse 11, read verse 11 again, Bob.
Okay. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians." Wherefore the name of it was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan.
Okay, so we see that the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, thought that the Israelites were Egyptians, right?
Yep.
Exodus chapter 2, going to pick it up in verse 15 through 19, verses 15 through 19. Now, when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, "How is it that ye come so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock."
Okay, so when Moses had fled away and he left from Pharaoh, now remember Moses was raised up in Pharaoh's house, right? Mm-hmm. So when Moses was raised up in Pharaoh's house, but when he come out of there, and he went, to the priest of Midian, the 7 daughters, they mistake Moses for an Egyptian, right? So we see that the Hebrews and the Egyptians had to look alike, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so now we're going to show y'all, how Hollywood, changed the depiction of Moses from what the Egyptians look like on the tomb walls to this.
Yeah. Look at Aaron. Aaron white too.
Yeah.
Let my people go.
Look at Pharaoh.
The sword shall
Let him rave on that men shall know him mad.
Obey the Lord, or he will raise his hand against the waters of the river.
I have come to bless the waters. You have come to curse them. You will learn if a god of shepherds is stronger than the gods of Pharaoh.
When you think about the psyche that plays on a unlearned individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you fast forward to today and you try to convince Israel that they're Israel.
Yeah.
And they'll crucify
Yeah, because
you.
like we talked about before. Yeah, we've got years of brainwashing and social engineering even in the church with that. Telling us that we're the Gentiles. So that's why I said, even when I used to watch that, what is that? They used to come on during Easter. It comes on during Easter.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you sit up and watch that, and it's like, Moses. Yeah, they was white peoples. Yeah. And then until you get into the word of God and you understand, and just like you said, once you even get a little older, that's when you start questioning, because you understand just through your knowledge base, once you get a little older, is that the people in that region had to be people of color. They had to be dark-skinned people. They had to be people of color. Yeah, just the region that they're in. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So look, imagine that, right? You get that programming where, where Moses is white and everything is whitewashed, right? The whole Hollywood is whitewashed. And then on the other side, you get the same thing taught in schools, but on the flip side, what they teach you in schools is you only come from cotton fields.
Yeah, right.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like, can you see how that's treacherous, man?
Well, you see what it is.
The history
it's stolen. It's stolen.
Yeah, that's the whole point,
right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it.
We see how it got us to the point where we are today, just by not knowing who you are and where you come from.
And a big portion of that is just making it like all we was slaves.
Right.
That's all we were. Yeah. That's
You never got in. Okay, well, before they got into slavery, who were these people?
Right.
Exactly.
And that's where all the confusion started to come in. Oh yes, well, we was African and we were from Ham and this, that, and other. And it's like, well, wait a minute, where were they before slavery? But even when we're in the school system going with the stolen identity, they pump that thing into you and make you think, okay, well, that was the beginning of your existence. Your people were slaves right off the rip.
Right.
That's all you would get in school. That's all they would tell you about was slavery.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we're getting ready to really uncover, what y'all are talking about as far as us coming over on the ships, the Negroes, you know what I mean, that came from Africa. That's the Southern Kingdom. And we're going to talk about the Northern Kingdom.
Who was the progenitor? Who was the progenitor of the Negroes? Who was that?
Before we move.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Before we move to that point, keep this in mind too. Think about Pharaoh. When he knew that Joseph had God's blessing on him, what did he do? He wanted Joseph to be in his house, so all of his land and all of his children can be. So that's important when we talk about identity and people know your identity. Why not steal your identity? Because if I steal it, then I maybe can steal your blessings. I can steal. Remember, so we have Egyptians and we have Israel, right? We're showing that they're similar, and in as far as culture and things of that nature.
Skin color. That's it. It's skin complexion and skin color.
Line,
you see it on the tombs, right?
So, but what people need to understand is Israel is a set apart people,
right?
Set apart from Egypt, set apart from this region, set apart. It's set apart for God Himself. So just keep that in mind. So that's why the importance of Israel. When we talk about identity, why is it important? Because we are a set apart people. God set us apart for His purpose.
Right.
And he wants us to be
Right.
separated, not to worship other gods, not to do what Solomon done, not to do, do
Yeah,
the
we're getting ready to get
abomination of
into
the
all
world.
that.
Yeah,
Yep, we're gonna
exactly.
get into all that. Yep, and that's where like I said, and that's a good point you're bringing. But Egypt, you know what I'm saying? They were the descendants of Ham, right? Whereas the Israelites are descendants of Shem. That's what we're trying to show people, right? And we've traced it down through the genealogy. But now we got to show Joseph's, sons. So let's go back to to Genesis chapter 41 and show Joseph's sons, because he's got two sons, and they are very important for you to understand who they are. So let's go Genesis 41, verses 50 and 52.
Genesis 41, verses 50 through 52. And unto Joseph were born two sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter Potipharah, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God said, He hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction.
Okay, so we know the two sons of Joseph, which are considered the half tribes. It's very important to understand Manasseh and Ephraim are Joseph's sons. Okay. All right. So now what we're getting ready to go to now is we're going to show, how the northern and the southern kingdom got split up. Okay. So in this next section, we're going to go through all of that. So now let's go 1 Kings chapter 11.
1 Kings chapter 11. I'm going to pick it up in verses 1 and 2. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. Of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, Ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. 1 Kings chapter 11, going to pick it up in verses 9 through 13. And the Lord was angry with Solomon, because his heart was turned from the Lord, God of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice, and commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods. But he kept not that which the Lord commanded. Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon, Forasmuch as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. Notwithstanding in thy days, I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. Howbeit I will not rend away all the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen.
Okay. All right. So what we have just now established, the beginnings of the splitting of the kingdom and the cause of the split in the kingdom, right? We know that there's the 12 tribes, but actually the tribe of Levi belongs to the Most High, but where the other 12 tribes, that's where, Ephraim and Manasseh come in. And that's where you get, really it's like it's 13 when it's really 12. Okay. But instead of Joseph, you count Ephraim and Manasseh, and they're considered the half tribes. But anyway, so we see Solomon basically had got with all these women, and God told him not to. And when he did that, God said, now I'm going to take, because now his heart turned away, and he said, now I'm taking 10 tribes away from you. You see what I'm saying? And I'm going to give them to somebody else. This is how Israel ends up having two kings. Okay. So let's go show everybody that. So let's go to 1 Kings chapter 12.
1 Kings chapter 12. I'm going to pick it up in verses 19 through 33. Verse 19. So Israel rebelled against the house of David until this day. And it came to pass, when all Israel heard that Jeroboam was come again, that they sent and called him unto the congregation and made him king over all Israel. There was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. And when Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah with the tribe of Benjamin and 180,000 chosen men, which were warriors, to fight against the house of Israel, to bring the kingdom again to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. But the word of God came unto Shemaiah, the man of God, saying, Speaking to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and all the house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the remnant of the people, saying, Thus saith the Lord, Ye shall not go up, nor fight against your brethren, the children of Israel. Return every man to his house, for this thing is from me. They hearkened therefore to the word of the Lord, and returned to depart according to the word of the Lord. Then Jeroboam built Shechem and Mount Ephraim, and dwelt therein, and went out from thence, and built Peniel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do the sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of his people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam the king of Judah, and they shall kill me and go again to Rehoboam king of Judah. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And he set the one in Bethel, and the other put he in Dan. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. And he made an house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month, and the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah, and he offered it upon the altar. So did he in Bethel, sacrificing unto the calf that he had made, and he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised of his own heart, and ordained a feast unto the children of Israel, and he offered upon the altar and burnt incense.
So major point here, right? God had already told Solomon he was going to split the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So when they was getting ready to get into this fight, Judah was getting ready to go and fight with them. But Judah, and you see who was with Judah, which was Benjamin, okay? So now we see where the kingdom is split. So now let's go and show them. So first thing that we see here, okay? I don't know if I can make it. Well, I guess I can't make it bigger. All right, so the first thing that we see here, if you see down here, you see Judah, okay? That was the southern kingdom. If you look up here, we see Israel, which was the northern kingdom, right? Now, so we're focusing on the northern kingdom. But now we see what Jeroboam did. He put golden calves in Dan and in Bethel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So he put those golden calves, and why did he do that? Because he didn't want the people of Israel to go back down into Judah to Jerusalem to do sacrifice to keep the feast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know how important that is, because the bottom line is that's how they get their atonement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that so much in our last videos, right? If you mess up the atonement, you mess up God's forgiveness. And if you mess up God's forgiveness, you got
trouble.
wrath coming on
you,
right?
in trouble.
Right.
That's sport coming.
Exactly, right? So you see what Jeroboam did. He basically got Israel in sin by messing with the atonement. Now, as we see right here, the territory of Benjamin, you see that's on the straddling or the line between Israel and Judah, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we see that the tribe of Benjamin stayed with Judah, and that's going to be important for us to really understand when we talk about the southern kingdom, because Benjamin was with Judah, okay? All right. Okay, so now we see basically what's going on there. So now let's go back to scripture. Let's go 1 Kings chapter 14.
1 Kings chapter 14. I'm going to pick it up in verses 15 and 16. Verse 15. For the Lord shall smite Israel, as a reed is shaken in the water, and he shall root up Israel out of this good land, which he gave to their fathers, and shall scatter them beyond the river, because they have made their groves, provoking the Lord to anger. And he shall give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam, who did sin, and who made Israel to sin.
All righty. You ready?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
All right. 2 Kings 17. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Eli, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord, their God, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. And the children of Israel did secretly those things that were not right against the Lord their God. And they built them high places in all their cities, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced city. And they set them up images and groves in every high hill, and under every green tree, and there they burnt incense in all the high places, as did the heathen whom the Lord carried away before them, and wrought wicked things to provoke the Lord to anger. For they served idols, whereof the Lord had said unto them, Ye shall not do this thing. Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. Notwithstanding they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers that did not believe in the Lord their God. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them, that they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of the Lord their God, and made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. Also Judah kept not the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel which they made. And the Lord rejected all the seed of Israel, and afflicted them, and delivered them into the hand of spoilers, until he had cast them out of his sight. For he rent Israel from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. And Jeroboam drave Israel from following the Lord, and made them sin a great sin. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They departed not from them, until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he said by all his servants the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cuthah, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria, and dwelt in the cities thereof. And so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there, that they feared not the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which slew some of them. Wherefore they spake to the king of Assyria, saying, The nations which thou hast removed and placed in the city of Samaria, know not the manner of the God of the land. Therefore he hath sent lions among them, and behold, they slay them, because they know not the manner of the God of the land. Then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, Carry thither one of the priests whom ye brought from thence, and let them go and dwell there, and let him teach them the manner of the God of the land. Then one of the priests whom they had carried away from Samaria came and dwelt in Bethel, and taught them how they should fear the Lord, Howbeit, every nation made gods of their own, and put them in the houses of the high places, which the Samaritans had made, every nation in their cities wherein they dwelt. And the men of Babylon made Succoth-Benoth, and the men of Cuth made Nergal, and the men of Hamath made Ashima, and the Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak, and the Sepharvites burnt their children in fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. So they feared the Lord, and made unto themselves of the lowest of them priests of the high places, which sacrificed for them in the houses of the high places. They feared the Lord, and served their own gods, after the manner of the nations whom they carried away from thence. Unto this day they do after the former manners. They fear not the Lord, neither do they after their statutes, or after their ordinances, or after the law and commandment which the Lord commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel, with whom the Lord had made a covenant, and charged them, saying, Ye shall not fear other gods, nor bow yourselves to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. But the Lord, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt with great power and a stretched out arm, him shall ye fear, and him shall ye worship, and to him shall ye do sacrifice. And the statutes and the ordinances and the laws and the commandment which he wrote for you, ye shall observe to do forevermore, and ye shall not fear other gods. And the covenant that I have made with you, ye shall not forget, neither shall ye fear other gods. But the Lord your God ye shall fear, and he shall deliver you out of the hand of all your enemies. Howbeit, they did not hearken, but they did after their former manner. So these nations feared the Lord, and served their graven images, but both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers, so do they unto this day.
Okay, so we see the identity swap. Let's go back and highlight 2 verses, okay?
Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land, and went up to Samaria, and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria, and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Halah, and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes, until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria until this day. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cutha, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria, instead of the children of Israel, and they possessed Samaria, and dwelt in the cities thereof.
Okay, so what we have at the top here is we have when Israel was united with the first king of Saul. Whereas you see, Saul's the first king that Israel. Remember, Israel cried for a king. Israel wanted to be like other nations, so God just honored Israel's request. So the first king that came on the scene was King Saul. As we look at this, he was the first king. So it relates to the previous king none, because he was the first one. He was the first king of Israel. As we see God's judgment, he did evil. We'll skip over the next one because a lot of people don't know that one. David. Yeah, we see where David, he did right. Okay. And then as we see, we move down to his son. He did right in his youth. Because remember, one of the first things that Solomon prayed for, he didn't pray for riches. He didn't pray for anything other than, and he had wisdom. A heart to serve the Lord. He prayed for wisdom. Yep. So we see that in his youth, he did the right thing. He knew it. But as he got older, as we saw,
them strange women got him. Them strange women got him.
Okay?
Yep.
And also with Solomon, what started was that the secret society.
Yep.
All of these mystery religions, and
they had all that stuff in there.
Egypt serving, worshiping the dead, and all that came from Solomon.
That's where you get into all that other stuff. So you know what I mean. But now let's get down to where we start showing the kings of Judah. So where we talked about the split, right? The kings of Judah is over here, and the king on the left, and the kings of Israel is right. That's where you got 2 different kings, and we showed it in the land, and we're going to show it again, right? Okay, so now when you got Rehoboam, remember over here on the left, Rehoboam is the king of Judah, and that was Solomon's son. And the Lord said, I'm going to take the kingdom away from Rehoboam, and 10 tribes was given to Jeroboam. Now, as you can see over here on the right, all of the kings after Jeroboam does evil. Why? Because they all kept going to Dan and Bethel when he made that sacrifice. That's why it said, when you read it, it said Jeroboam made Israel to sin a great sin. Okay, so we see as the kingdom went down here, and Hoshea was the final king. You see what I'm saying? When Israel got carried away, and the real Assyrians, and that's where we got down here to the Assyrian captivity, right? Now we're going to come back, you know what I mean, when we do part 2, and we're going to get on the Babylonian captivity when we talk about what happened to the southern kingdom. So we're going to focus primarily on the northern kingdom, the Assyrian captivity. Okay.
As we looked at the list and we saw the kings, and God honored Israel's request for kings. So as you said, every king pretty much did evil for the most part. Okay. So now we can see as we go back why an atonement is needed. Right. Okay. Because what does it say in the last verse of 17? It say up until this day they still continue to do these things. What do we see in America? These same things. What do we see in the world? These same things. So
okay. All right, so let's talk about this again. All right. So now what we see, all right, Israel, we see Samaria and Shechem right there. Okay. So this is where you know what I mean, the Samaritans, because this was like the capital of the northern kingdom, right? Because see, this is the northern kingdom all through here, right? Now this is the southern kingdom, as we see with Judah down here, and we see the capital was Jerusalem. Okay. All right. Now, but what happened? What did we read? What happened? The 10 tribes got carried away out of the land. They got kicked out. The king of Babylon then turns around. The Assyrians turn around and bring other people in here to populate, and that's why they were called the Samaritans, right? Okay. So now this is where when you get the Samaritans, you know what I mean, claiming to be Israelites, but they weren't the real people. So you see the identity change that happened. Okay. Right. Okay. So now we got to continue tracing. Well, what happened? And this is where you get where everybody talks about the lost 10 tribes. Okay. And now we got to do some tracing down to try to hunt these people down. All right.
Just where are the lost tribes of Israel? The following map is a very shortened recap of our Lost Tribes series, in which we follow the migrations of all 12 tribes of Israel through hundreds of scriptures with historic support. And if you are looking for evidence, it is overwhelming. And it is found in that series, not here. A difficult task indeed, but we have systematically, overwhelmingly proven where they went, where they are, and from where they will return. Here is that story in brief. After the reign of the third king of Israel, King Solomon, who had built the temple, the nations split into 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, still called Israel, and the southern kingdom of 3 tribes, essentially known as Judea. The tribe of Levi was in both. In around 700 BC, all, according to scripture, of the northern kingdom of Israel was taken captive and deported out of their land into Assyria. The Bible identifies 3 specific areas which define the border of what is known today as Kurdistan, which is an autonomous region, sort of, in Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Turkey. Once the Assyrian Empire was conquered by the rising Babylonian Empire, the lost tribes were released from captivity. Some chose to stay in Kurdistan and are still there to this day. Returning to Israel was not an option because they were replaced in those days by the Assyrian Empire. The other portion took a 1.5-year journey from Assyria, crossing the Euphrates without crossing the Tigris, near the Persian Gulf. They then traveled to where they would meet ships, yes, ships, for the remainder of their journey in a place still named today for the smoked sacrifices they gave to Yahuwah God in that era, even though it is known as a Muslim land, yet retains its Hebrew given name. That place is called Qatar, specifically Dukan Qatar, which also means smoke sacrifices, oddly. Just as Israel did in the first and the third Exodus, they sacrificed offerings to Yahuwah God. They then met up with many ships from ancient Ophir, whose history well documents its seaworthy vessels from that era, even that were as large as the Spanish ships, and they had several of them. They boarded and resumed the rest of their 1.5-year journey to the land of creation, Arsareth, also known as Ophir, modern Philippines. They landed in the desert of the Philippines, which really narrows it down because there is only one, on the northwest tip of its largest island, and there were several other landing sites spreading the lost tribes throughout several of the 7,000 plus isles of Ophir, Philippines. They too are still there to this day, as Isaiah says in Tarshish, Ophir, and Sheba, the isles at the ends of the earth.
Okay, so you see, he just talks about this what happened with the Northern Kingdom. And that's where people think this is how, the migration went into the South Pacific Islands, right? But now let me go show you some more stuff. Let me go show you some stuff that I got from a book, right? Let me show you this. So this is a book that I got, The Negro in the New World, right? All right, so if we go down over here, where the part that I have highlighted over in here, okay? I'm going to start reading from over here, okay? All right. Anyway, but when at the bottom that I got in highlighted, to this day, dwarf Negro people survive in the Far East, the Semang in the forests of the Malay Peninsula, and the Eta in the Philippine Islands. There are traces of the passage of a Negroid people through Sumatra and Borneo and the island of Timor, and markedly so in New Guinea, right? Though here they have mingled with the Australoid and have produced the well-marked Papuan race. The existing populations of the Solomon Islands, of New Ireland, and of the New Hebrides are much more Negro-like in physical characteristics. In fact, perhaps the people of New Ireland are the most nearly akin to the African Negro, or all the Asiatic or Australasian peoples, right? So you see these people, right, what they look like, down there and you see their skin complexion. That's really the true people that were down there in the South Pacific Islands, okay? But anyway, continue on reading, okay? There is a Negroid Melanesian element in Fiji and as far west as the Hawaiian archipelago and among the Maoris of New Zealand, in a much less degree also in Burma, Annam, Hainan, Formosa, the Ryukyu Islands, and southern Japan. The Elamites of Mesopotamia appear to have been a Negroid people with kinky hair, and to have transmitted this racial type to the Jews and Syrians, right? There's a curliness of the hair, together with a Negro eye and full lips in the portraiture of Assyria, which conveys the idea of an evident Negro element in Babylonia, right? Quite possibly the very ancient Negro invasion of Mediterranean Europe, of which the skeletons of the Alps Maritimes or vestiges came from Syria and Asia Minor on its way to Central and Western Europe. It is possible that in or on the verge of Arabia, the ancient basal stock of the generalized Negro parted, divided into two great streams of divergent immigration, one to proceed to Europe via Syria and the other to pass through Arabia to Egypt and tropical Africa. In Arabia or in Egypt, arose the difference between the long-headed African Negro and the rounder, shorter-headed Bushman, the last name becoming more habituated than his congeners to a life in arid deserts or scrubby open country. The African Negro was again differentiated, probably in East Africa, into three main varieties, okay? So now you see how they compared the African Negro. But I want you to be able to see this bottom of this picture, so let me change this. Hold on a second. All right, so now you see what this says in the when you see the number one up here, when they talked about the Jews, right? The Jews and the Syrians. So we go down to the bottom of the page and where you can really see it. The Jews are composed of 3 or 4 separate racial elements. The Asiatic Negroid strain, right? So see, they know that these people that down there in the Pacific Islands, you know, they know who they are. The Asiatic Negroid strain shows itself occasionally in the curly hair, the long eye, and proportions of the skull. The Jewish hybrids, now you see how they're calling them Jews, right. Jewish, right?
Right.
Hybrids with the Negro in Jamaica and Guyana reproduce most strikingly the Assyrian type, right? And we know that they got carried into Assyria, right? It is quite conceivable that the great peninsula of Arabia, which is where the Semites were, right, was once populated as far as its natural conditions allowed by a primitive Negro stock, which may have been later or partially exterminated by changing and unfavorable conditions of climate and by the aftercoming of the white man and his types, right? So they telling you that the real Jews were Negroid, right, in appearance.
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
When you think Jew, you think Judah.
Yeah.
So that's
all right. So now let's go to our next exhibit, you know, from the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, and let's show you something else. Okay, so when you look in the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, what you see is Ham, and we went through Noah's 3 sons, right? And it says Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, right? Not the Negroes. Right? So if the Negroes are not the descendants of Ham, and we see that, you know what I mean, the other people that was in the Arabian Peninsula are the Shemites, right? So not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, the Libyans, and the Canaanites. All of those dark races are the descendants of Ham, right? So the Ethiopians and the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, the Libyans, and the Canaanites, right? So now we see, you know, that the Negroes are not the descendants of Ham.
That's right. Yeah, that's what it's right there.
Right there.
Right. Okay. All right. So next we got another thing to show. All right. So we see where this video guy talks about how the people went down into the Philippines. Now I'm going to show you something. You know what I mean? I told you about your football team, Leroy. The Redskins.
The Redskins.
All right. Let me show you an exhibit from another book. All right, so in this book by Timothy R. Jenkins, The 10 Tribes of Israel, all right, let's go and let's look at what it says, you know, a couple pages in the book. Many years ago, the attention of the compiler of the following pages was first called to the subject by hearing a lecture delivered by a highly educated Cherokee Indian on the manners and customs of the various Indian tribes of North America. During the course of his remarks, he stated that when he came to study the Hebrew language, he was astonished to find so much of his own language that was pure Hebrew. And after enumerating the various words of his own language that were Hebrew, he found them to exceed 50, and said we were taught this by our ancestors, and they received it from their Hebrew ancestors, the 10 tribes, right? So now we're seeing that they're saying part of the 10 tribes were the North American Indians, right?
Yep.
And furthermore, he stated that he was as firmly convinced that the Indian tribes of North America were descendants of the 10 tribes of Israel, as he was of any other fact. This statement induced us to examine history on this question, and we have found many facts corroborating the testimony of the red man of the force. Though differing from some other writers on this subject, we have the testimony of a number of the most eminent men of America to sustain our position, right? The following is taken from the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha is some of the books that, have been removed out of the King James Bible. 2nd Esdras 13, verses 40 through 45. To show when the 10 tribes left the eastern country to come to a land not inhabited by man. Now, we see from that last video that we showed that, it showed how some of them went down into the South Pacific Islands, right? But this is what it says. These are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea, the king, which we went over, whom Salmanazar, the king of Assyria, led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country, where never mankind dwelt. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Sharpeneth. Now, what are we to learn from the foregoing history? First, we are taught that they understood the geography of the country and the distance they must travel in order to get to this land where no man dwelt. And second, that there was no country in the east, but what was more or less inhabited by man, and consequently, America was the only country at that time known that was not inhabited, right? So now, in the next page of that book, you know what I'm saying? And he's going to talk about some of the men that were North American Englishmen, you know what I'm saying, who had come over here to this land. And what they found when they came over here to talk, when they came over here and found, these Native Americans, right? So this is where we got the North American Indian. The following is from J.J. Mombert's History of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, page 68. Being an extract from a letter written by William Penn to the Committee of the Free Society of Traders in London, England, 1683. He states of the origin of the North American Indian, I am ready to believe them of the Jewish race. I mean of the stock of the 10 tribes. So when they come over here, they was thinking, wait a minute, how these people know all these customs, right? And that for the following reasons. First, they were to go to a land not planted or known, which to be sure, Asia and Africa were, if not Europe, and he that intended that extraordinary judgment upon them might make the passage not uneasy to them, as it is not impossible in itself from the easternmost parts of Asia to the westernmost parts of America. Okay, so we can keep that in mind because we're going to come back to that in a minute. In the next place, I find them of the like countenance and their children of so lively resemblance that a man would think himself in Duke's Place or Berry Street, London, when he seeth them, but this is not all. They agree in rites, they reckon by moons, they offer their first fruits, they have a kind of feast of tabernacles, they are said to lay their altar upon 12 stones, their mourning a year, customs of women, with many other things that do not now occur. Reverend James S. Milliken writes from Argyle, New York, May 13th, 1853, to a friend of Allegheny, Pennsylvania, having in my possession a very curious relic or facsimile of a relic of that ancient nation, the Jews. I take the liberty of addressing you in reference to it, in order that I and others may have benefit of your opinion concerning it, that to which I refer in the facsimile in block 10 of a silver coin found last summer in Michigan, about 20 miles from Detroit, right? Now, remember, this is written in 1853, right? 2 feet under the surface of the earth. The coin is about the size of an American $50, not so great in circumference, but thicker. On one side is represented a censer with smoking incense with a Hebrew inscription, Jewish shekel. On the other also is a Hebrew inscription, the Holy Jerusalem, with a representation of an olive tree or perhaps palm tree. The original piece found is in possession of Dr. Duffield, Detroit. It is more than possible that this shekel of Israel was lost by Indians, and that it is not another evidence that they are descendants of the 10 tribes. Here follows the remarks of his friend. The relic is plainly Israelitish. The facsimile represents accurately the silver shekel of Israel. It was worth 50 cents of our money. Our silver $50 is nearly a half ounce avoirdupois. The shekel of Israel was known in Persia, right? Because remember, they got scattered down through Persia, right? Down through Iran. It is mentioned in Xenophon's Anabasis, this relic having been discovered in Michigan, 20 miles west of Detroit, 2 feet underground. It must have been left there before the discovery of America by Columbus, who could have left it there but one of the 10 tribes, right? All right, so now we see that there's people that were saying, wait a minute, these people, when they came over here, these people had speaking Hebrew, they found Hebrew relics and all of this type of stuff, right? Okay, so now I got another book to show you some stuff out of. So let them show you and describe the people, right, according to this book. This is view of the Hebrews, and you see where they got the little Hebrew writing on the arrowhead, right? View of the Hebrews 1825 by Ethan Smith. Let's see what Ethan has to say about this. So I'm going to pick it up in the highlight area over here. Okay, so let's start over here. All right, Dr. Boudinot, who for more than 40 years was of opinion that the Indians are the 10 tribes. Now remember, when Columbus called them Indians, he supposedly thought he was in the real India down there, and, you know what I'm saying, in the land where the Shemites are, okay? And he said that based off of the color of the people, which we're going to talk about. All right, who are more than 40 years was of opinion that the Indians are the 10 tribes, and who sought and obtained much evidence on this subject, assures us that the syllables which compose the word Yahuwah, Jehovah, and Jah are the roots of a great number of Indian words. Through different tribes, they make great use of these words and of the syllables which compose the names of God, also which form the word hallelujah. Through their nations for thousands of miles, especially in their religious songs and dances. With beating and an exact keeping of time, they begin a religious dance, thus, how, then lay, next lu, and then close ya. This is their traditional song of praise to the Great Spirit. Now remember, the 10 tribes knew the name of the Father, Yahuwah, hallelujah, right? And so when all they
hallelujah, and we used to,
we was mocking it, you know what I mean? And they was actually, that's what they were doing in their chants and their dance, right? So this is right, especially before they go to war or anything, right?
Right.
This it is asserted in a song is sung in South as well as North America, right? As this author says, 2 Indians who belong to far distant nations may, without the knowledge of each other's language, except from the general idiom of all their tribes, converse with each other and make contracts without an interpreter. This shows them to have been of one origin. Again, he says, every nation of Indians have certain customs which they observe in their public transactions with other nations and in their private affairs among themselves, and it is scandalous for anyone among them not to observe. And these always draw after them either public or private resentment whenever they are broken. Although these customs may in their detail differ in one nation when compared with another, yet it is easy to discern that they have all had one origin. Dr. Pratt says in his History of Louisiana, the nations of North America derive their origin from the same country, since at bottom they all have the same manners and usages, and the same manner of speaking and thinking. It is ascertained that no objection arises against this from the different shades of complexion found among different tribes of Indians. So now he describes the color of the people. The color of the Indians generally, says Dr. Boudinot, is red, brown, or copper. Right? According to the climate and the high or low ground. So depending on the climate, if they're in the north, they're going to be a little lighter complected, but as they get closer to where the hot tropics are, they're going to be darker in appearance, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, so we see what these people, when they initially came over here, said about the people. You know what I'm saying? So now let's show you the map, of how they could have possibly gone from the far east into America.
But that's funny, we talked about that before, that hallelujah. Yeah.
Right.
And we watch these movies and they Hey, y'all, hey, y'all, hey, y'all, hey.
Right.
And now you understand what they really were saying.
And
Yeah.
they, and,
Right.
and they were making a
Absolutely.
they were making a mockery of it.
Yeah, and they praising
Yeah.
God. They praising the Most
Yeah.
High. Yeah.
Yeah, but think about it. But they're there with no atonement. We're gonna cover why they got defeated and everything. Because remember, Japheth has to dwell in who? The tents of Shem.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
Yep. All
Teach
right.
them.
Yep. Okay. All right. So now let's pick it up. So if here's Israel over here, this is a flat Earth map. For all y'all
There
that
we
don't
go.
understand.
Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you, brother.
sir.
Thank
Yes,
you, my
sir.
brother.
All right. So Israel. Let's get this. Let's get the writing up here. Let's get the color. All right. The pen.
Tell the real story, my brother. Tell the real story, my brother.
Right. Okay. So Israel is over here, right? So if they did come down through here, right, as in that one video, they came down through here, and then we see that they came over into the Philippine Islands, all the South Pacific Islands, right? Up here is Japan, right? And this is what we read just now, where he talks about them coming. And we read in the one place where it says they were, migrating into southern Japan, right? But if they continued north, this is why when you understand the continuation of north, here's when they're talking about the eastern of Asia, because this is Russia right here, right? Okay. All right. So now as they continue north, guess where it is? Right on the Bering Strait up there. And now we're in Alaska, right? So you see how they could go from eastern, like the book said, how they would go from the eastern Asia into Western America, right? And as we can see from here, they could have easily migrated all through this land and all down through here, right? Right? Because this land, when we looked at the land when we first did Noah and his sons, all of them were all in this region. That's all they ever known about, right? The Hamites went this way, the Japhites went up north, the Semites, this was their land, you see, and they had all of this, right? So now we see how the migration patterns, and it makes perfectly sense of how once they got kicked out and they did go down through this way, you know what I'm saying, into the South Pacific Islands, and then they would migrate also because they had known how to get on ships and everything, and then they ended up coming all down through North America. Okay.
And now looking at that map, you can see how the people were scattered throughout all the ends of the earth.
There you go.
Because it's hard to conceptualize that. We're looking at a globe. You know what I'm saying? But when you look at the world as it is, flat. You can see how that correlation takes place.
Absolutely.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yep. And we're gonna and we still got to get to the Southern Kingdom now. But now let's go get another video, right? You know what I'm saying? And this is a book I didn't know. I just found this on YouTube the other day. But let's go get this video.
All right, we're gonna get into this other book. It's called The History of Ancient America by George Jones, but that's not the full title. Let me just show you right here. Again, The History of Ancient America, anterior to the time of Columbus, proving the identity of the Aborigines with the Tyrians and Israelites. The Aborigines of America with Israelites, and the introduction of Christianity into the Western Hemisphere by the Apostle St. Thomas by George Jones. All right, and we're going to go to chapter 2 of this book. It says the Northern Aborigines have a traditional knowledge of the deluge, all right, the flood, and the dove of peace, which to them under the name of the medicine or mystery bird is sacred from the arrow of the hunter. They have their Ark of Covenant, all right, so the Indians have an Ark of Covenant again, in which is deposited.
Now remember, it says they had the Ark of Covenant, but remember, Jeroboam gave them a false religion. Remember all of that, right? So they didn't have the real thing, you know what I mean? And that's why they got kicked out. But they practiced, a lot of this stuff, but he put them into worshiping falsely and having false days and all of this type of stuff.
Mystery, seen only by the priest of the tribe. It is said to be a shell and supposed to give out oracular sounds. This is an analogy to the Book of the Laws, placed in the Ark of Covenant by Moses, preceding his death on Mount Nebo, Utah. Alright, check it out. Moses in America, my video. The oracular wisdom of which has guided
Now, I don't agree with all that. Some things you got to cut out.
civilization to this day. The ark is never suffered to touch the earth, but it always raised on a stand of wood or stone. They're talking about American Indians. It is invariably carried by a tribe when they march to battle. A similitude is here to Joshua at the siege of Jericho, just like Joshua did before he took Jericho. Alright, carrying the ark. Alright, so Joshua gets a colt, the feathered serpent. Is that who we're talking about? When it is in their peaceful encampment, it is surrounded by 12 stones, indicative of the original number of the tribes of their ancestors. Alright, this is talking about American Indians, remember. This is strictly in analogy with the 12 statues, probably rude blocks of stone, erected by Moses around the altar of the covenant to personify the 12 tribes of Israel. Joshua also, after the passage of the Jordan, erected 12 stones in his encampment at Gilgal, and the same number in the river at the place of the passage. They select their medicine men. Alright, again, back to the Indians. They select their medicine men, example, priests or prophets, from among a portion of the tribe, not warriors. Here is the custom of the Levites, or descendants of Aaron, being in the sacred office of priesthood. For with the Israelites they were not to be taken from the ranks of the soldiery. Alright, so you hear that? These aborigines dwell in booths, as when brought out of the land of Egypt, for they are still wanderers. Leviticus 23. They offer a flesh or burnt offering from the chase, which is first cast into the flames before even a starving family may eat. Right? Again, we're talking about Indians here. They have their corn and harvest feast, also in one in observance of every new moon, another in festivity of the first fruits, and the great feast in direct analogy with the Hebrews, Passover. All right, we've dwelt on this before on past videos in this series. All right, you can see him saying the same thing. All right, it's the customs of the American Indians, even to the blood being stained upon the posts and lintels, and the mingling of the most bitter herbs. Then their fastings and purifications are practiced with the greatest severity. The breastplate or ornament worn by the religious prophets, containing 12 shells, or stones of value, in its direct imitation, high priest, in which contain 12 precious stones, inscribed with the names of all the 12 original tribes of Israel. They have their cities of refuge, or huts of safety, where the most deadly foe dare not enter for his victim. Alright, so the Indians had a lot of refuge towns or places. Alright, they never violate a female captive, and upon the Hebrew principle that their blood shall not be contaminated by interreunion. This has been strictly followed in all their wars with the Europeans. They also reject the savage practice of civilization upon the lofty principle of manly virtue. The medicine bag or pouch is carried by every member of the tribe. It is suspended to a bead belt, which crosses the breast by passing over the left shoulder, and hang on the right side. It contains, as they say and believe, preservatives to keep them from sickness or defeat. These are essentially the phylacteries referred to by the Savior and previously condemned by Moses, for the word phylactery is derived from the Greek tongue and denotes a preservative. And in the time of Moses they were worn by his people in great excess, and so by the northern native. Moses checked the excessive use of the preservatives and changed the custom, for by his command the priesthood alone wore the phylactery, which was alas a frontlet of parchment for the forehead, upon which was written an extract from the laws, that those that run might read. Then the absence of all idols or symbolical devices, and the worship of one God. Example, the Great Spirit. Alright, so we're not talking about religions, we're not talking about anything to do with gold worshiping or Abrahamic religions, as you call it. We're just talking about that you're the book. Alright, no idol worship, just like the Israelites. One God is the Great Spirit. It's the same thing. Wakan Tanka, Wakang Tanka Hawa, Jahwa. Alright, they're never pronouncing the name Jehovah, but in syllables, and those separated by long ceremonies, thus truly fulfilling the Hebrew law. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. The name with them sounds as if written Je-ho-va, and it's not that, because we know already from the past videos, right? It's a wa. They had the Jehovah, Jehovah, Jehovah. You can hear it in their music, in their chants, Jehovah. The Lakota, right? Jehovah. We read that already. Alright? So again, syllables Jehovah. And it's only pronounced by the Aaron of the tribe. In their hymns of rejoicing, the word hallelujah is distinctly uttered. Alright? They say hallelujah, hallelujah, hey, hallelujah, Jehovah. It's to the foregone analogies is to be added the general and firm belief in the immortality of the soul. But beyond all this proof of their origin is the practice of the great covenant between the Almighty Father and the patriarch Abraham, circumcision. And it does not exist as in parts of Egypt and the Asiatic nations for the purpose of supposed health, in which belief it was practiced in ancient Egypt by both sexes, but as a religious custom handed down from time immemorial, alright, the Indians. The custom now is not general, but it does exist, and we must be understood as referring back at least 200 years in our review, to the period of the Pilgrim Fathers, when the northern aborigines numbered 15 millions. 15 millions. The Pilgrims got there. Now they scarcely number 2.5. All the customs, however, noticed are practiced at the present period by the uncontrolled aboriginal, the uncontrolled rebels. If all other evidences were not received, that of circumcision as a religious ceremony must be viewed by the most skeptical as direct proof of identity between the northern aborigines and the ancient Hebrews. The customs we have written is not general. It is only found in the more settled tribes. This even supports our belief, for in this very fact is traced again the precedent ordained by Moses. For circumcision was discontinued by the great lawgiver for 40 years during his journeying with his followers through the wilderness. The custom was reestablished by Joshua. May not this innovation by Moses in the covenant custom be imitated by these descendants? Are they not still wanderers in the wilderness in the western, as their ancestors were in the eastern hemisphere? The affirmative has existed for ages, and even now continues. They have not yet returned to Jerusalem. You have not returned to Jerusalem.
That was pretty deep right there. I like
Deep,
that.
ain't it?
It was pretty
You know what I'm
deep
saying?
right
And I'll put the link in the description of the video and everything. But you see, you know, you had the people that was coming over that knew. You see what I'm saying? That wait a minute, these people have the customs of the ancient Israelites, right? Now we know from the scripture what happened, from what the Bible tells us, is that they had part, but they got kicked out because they still was they created Jeroboam and made them a feast. They took priests, yep, and they took priests of you know that wasn't supposed to be priests. They made their own priests. So that's why even when they left, they still made them priests. And as we covered in them other videos, you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
only the real priest could go before God. So now when they get kicked out, and God said, I don't care where you go. You know, if you go and you know what I mean, you flee, my judgment still is on you because you're still my covenant people, right? So now let's give these people, you know, something about Japheth. You know, when the first prophecy with the Ham, Japheth, and Shem about the Gentiles. Okay, so let's go here. Let's go show something.
Real quick before you do that. But you see how Hollywood is treacherous with how they depict us. If you go back to the old John Wayne movies, who was he killing? You know what I mean? Who was he always fighting against? When you go
The
back
Native
to
Americans.
what's it called?
How did they depict them as savages?
You go back
As
to
savages.
again the birth of a nation. How did they depict us?
Yep. Yeah, it's savages, right? And to be honest, a lot of Negroes are Native Americans. You see what I'm saying? My grandmother, you know what I mean? She always checked Negroes, but my grandmother, her mother was half white, half Native American. Her dad was full-blooded Native American. And she told me out of her own mouth, because, you know, we lived together, right? She told me out of her own mouth that her dad was dark-skinned. You see what I'm saying? Dark brown like me. You see what I mean? So the bottom line is, the Native Americans were dark-skinned people, and that's why, you think about it. If they're Israel, they're the northern kingdom. When God brought the southern kingdom over here, both of the houses of Israel were back together in America.
Amen.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
This thing gets deep. But let's go show people about Japheth dwelling in the tents of Shem, right?
Genesis chapter 9, I'm going to pick it up in verses 24 through 27. And Noah awake from his wine and knew what his younger son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brother. And he said, Blessed be the Lord of God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant.
Okay. All right. So we see God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So now here we go. Right. The tents of Shem. We knew that Shem's land was here, right? Down through here in Arabia and all this type of stuff. Remember, Ham, all his land is over here, pretty much in Africa, right? Mm-hmm. Japheth was to the north, right? Now, you know what I'm saying? When the Greeks come down into this portion here, Japheth, which was Greek, you see what I'm saying? And Alexander the Great and them, they basically conquered all of that region, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so the Greeks came in, and this is where you got the mixing with the Shemites, you see what I'm saying? And that's where the Arabs, and Arab actually means mixed, right? Which most people don't understand, right? So then they come over here. But now, if the Israelites had come over here into a North and South America, okay, then guess what? The Shemites had gotten to this land over here. Well, guess what? Guess who came over here and ended up, you see what I'm saying? Ended up in this land as well, and taking over Shem's land again, dwelling in the land of Shem, Japheth, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see? So now it explains why, even though Shem had come over to this land, but Japheth came over here and followed them and then took the land over. Why? Because the Israelites have to be in the land that God had promised to Abraham over here in Israel, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the promised land, but they have to get right. And when God said, you know what, y'all break my covenant, I'm scattering you throughout the four corners of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So now we see that, but now let's go ahead.
So on point right there. On point right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
The globe don't have corners.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Great point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so this is the first part. You know what I mean? And we basically wanted to show that. You know what I mean? We're gonna have to do part 2 to show what happened to the southern kingdom. Okay. But let's go ahead and close it out. You know what I mean? 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 through 24. Brother Bob, go ahead and take us out here.
Now, Brother Bob.
All right, John chapter 4, verses 7 through 24. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, Give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle?
Now
Jesus,
stop. Stop. Verse 12. Art thou greater than our father Jacob? Was Jacob really their father? You see?
Right.
This is why the Jews didn't have any dealings with the Samaritans, right? Because they knew they wasn't the real Israelites, right?
Imposters.
Right. Keep going.
Jesus answered and said unto her, whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. Jesus saith unto her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband, for thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that saidest thou truly. The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship.
Stop.
Jesus,
So now we see another thing, right? Our fathers worshipped in this mountain. You weren't supposed to be worshiping in that mountain because you had to go to Jerusalem, right? But Jeroboam got him in trouble, and this woman, thinking that she's an Israelite, which she's not, don't even know, right? You see what I'm saying? So she's claiming to be something that she's not, you know, but they've been given a false identity, right? Verse 21.
Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth.
Amen. So we see now you have a greater understanding of what was really going on in that conversation. Jesus like, y'all don't even know what you worship. You ain't the real Jews. You ain't the real Israelites. We know what we worship, because see, he's still part of the southern kingdom, right?
Jesus
the southern kingdom is
Jesus would never speak that way. That's not loving.
Yeah, that's not loving. You know what I mean? But he says, you don't know what you worship. You know, we know what we worship. Salvation is of the Jews. This is still our stuff. We the real Israelites. Y'all are a bunch of imposters, right? But you see, man, and that's why they marveled that he was talking with this woman of Samaria, because the Israelites knew these were not the real Israelites. The 10 tribes had already been scattered, right? Okay. But what did he say? The time comes, you ain't gonna be even worship at Jerusalem. You see what I'm saying? God is a spirit. And even when they was kicked out over here in America, they still knew the Father, Jehovah
was a great spirit.
Was the great spirit. Right?
Amen.
And so Jesus said, you don't know what you worship. You see what I'm saying? We know what we worship. You see what I mean? But he said, God is a spirit, and those that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth.
Amen.
Right? Amen. So that's part 1 of this video, where we talked about the stolen identity. We proved that the northern kingdom had their identity stolen, right? Next video, we got to talk about the southern kingdom, Judah, right? Y'all stay tuned. God bless y'all.
God bless y'all.
About, you know what I'm saying, you know, Esau and all this kind of jive or whatever. But at the end of the day, you got to understand, and we're going to point that out, who Esau was. So let's just continue on with our what's the word?
Chronology.
Yeah. All right, so let's just continue on with our
We're talking about the bloodlines.
Yeah. I tried to change it up in this. I say lineage. All right, so let's continue on with our chronology. You know what I mean? So let's go to First Chronicles. You know what I mean, and continue on with our lineage.
Yeah, right there, First Chronicles. You feel?
Hey, bro, I didn't want to say Chronicles. I had to figure out the words, bro.
The teaching gave you the word Chronicles. Right there. It's gonna be a saucy one tonight.
1 Kings chapter 11. Going to pick it up in verses 1 and 2. Verse 1. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites.
Right. Brother Leroy can't speak.
Yeah. He was doing good. He just
Yeah.
I started laughing because I knew it was Zidonians, but I was like, because every time we do this, I was like, I get the giggles, man. My bad.
It's all good.
All right, here we go. All right, take 3.
All right.
All right, 1 Kings chapter 11. I'm going to pick it up in verses 1 and 2. But King Solomon loved all right. All right. 1 Kings chapter 11. 1 Kings chapter 11. I'm going to pick it up in verses 1 and 2. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the
It's in your head. It's in your head. It's in your head now. It's in your head now.
Oh man, all right. Here we go. Just take 4.
All right.
All right. 1 Kings chapter 11. I'm going to pick it up in verses 1 and 2. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites. All right, here we go. Take 5 or 6 or 7. I don't know where it's from.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. I'm going to get serious. All right, here we go. 1 Kings chapter 11, going to pick it up in verses 1 and 2. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites. I'm starting from the beginning. 1 Kings 11, going to pick up 11 verses 1 and 2. Verse 1. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the All right, here we go. 1 Kings chapter 11. I'm going to pick it up in verses 1 and 2. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites.